Nope. All right. Welcome everyone for this edition of the Charleston Daily Mail editorial board. Thank you for coming and taking time out of your day. We're interested in what you all have to say. We are live streaming and live blogging, and we'll produce a story for the paper, and this will lead to a large factor in the process. But just the fact that we're getting to know you and to engage readers and voters with the issues of the campaign is the main issue that we'll discuss. So we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Brad McElhaney, I'm the editor of the Daily Mail.
Dave Boucher, I'm the Capitol Bureau Chief.
I'm Bill Baraka, I'm the managing editor.
I'm Kelly Merritt, editorial page editor, and I appreciate y'all coming. I also want to say Don Sperber is ill today. He really would like to have been here, but he was eventually this one. He probably is. He may tweet it. He may tweet a question.
Okay.
Well, I'm Eric Nelson, and running for this third term for the 35th seat, and running basically on the same platform that I did prior to two times. Bringing a business-minded, common-sense approach to legislation. I think my prior two terms have shown that I've brought that to the table. My background is one of the financial world. I have a solid personal background, married 30 years, and have 3 kids that have all gone through the public education system. And I'd like to ask you for your endorsement today. Thank you.
I'm Chris Stansberry, first-time candidate for the West Virginia House of Delegates. Born and raised here in Charleston. Lived in the state most of my life. Graduated from George Washington High School and went to West Virginia University and attended the Southern College of Optometry and got my doctorate in optometry degree there. Came back to West Virginia to begin my practice here. It's been a privilege to be a West Virginian. I love this state. It's the reason I came back to this state after we finished up school. Married my college sweetheart, and we have 2 kids, 2 boys, ages 7 and 3. So education is of vital importance to us. We want to make sure that our kids receive the proper kind of education here in West Virginia that will prepare them for a modern workforce. And we want to make sure that when they work hard and finish their education, they have the opportunity to come back and get a job here and not have to move out of state like so many of our friends and family and relatives have had to do over the last several decades. I'm also running for the House of Delegates because I have a big interest in business as a small business owner, and also in the healthcare industry as an eye doctor. I feel that I can bring some fresh perspective and expertise to the House of Delegates in those 2 areas. We have started a business from scratch here in Charleston and have grown that over the last 3.5 years and have had great success, and we feel very fortunate for that. But we want others to have the opportunity to start and to grow business here in West Virginia. Business is not the end. Business is here to provide jobs, to provide income for our West Virginia families, to make sure that people can have what they need and can support their families. So again, I'm running as a family man, as a doctor, and as a business owner to bring new perspective to the House of Delegates. Thank you.
My name is John McCuskey. I'm running for my 2nd term in the House of Delegates. And just like last time, I'm running because I grew up in West Virginia in the Kanawha Valley, and I truly love my state and I love my community. But I believe that we can do better for the people that live here. And I truly believe in the people that live here. And I think that if we can reprioritize our government to really focus in on the things that state governments can do well and the things that state governments can do to give the people of our state the opportunities that they deserve, that we can see a West Virginia that has never really existed before. And I believe that I can be a part of that, and I hope to win again so that we can really finish the job that we've gotten started. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Bird, first-time candidate for House of Delegates, 35th District, born and raised in South Charleston, West Virginia. Graduated from South Charleston High School, went to WVU for both my undergraduate and graduate school, graduated from law school in 2008. Came back, my wife and I are married here in South Charleston, so West Virginia born and raised and here to stay. When I say here to stay, that is what I want to do. I want to stay here and work with the community in making this a better place for all West Virginians. that is one reason. That is the main reason why I'm running for House of Delegates. Is I want to be interactive. I want to be that politician that interacts with the community. I feel like we've gotten too far away from that. To face any of the challenges or tackle the problems in our communities, we need to work with everyone, and that's what I'll do.
I'm Bobby Hatfield. I live in South Charleston, West Virginia, and I'm a registered nurse and have worked in home health care, hospitals, hospice, and I want to run for election again. I lost in the last election by 41 votes. We're running because we think we can pick up that seat. Some of the issues that I am really interested in is, of course, healthcare issues, and I believe that I'll bring perspective because we have all phases of nursing, working in different areas and social areas. We know what needs to be developed. We know what is too expensive, and so therefore, I believe that I can direct some legislation that will benefit my patients and the people of Kanawha County. One other thing, when I served, I was vice chairman of the Health and Human Resource Committee. I've now been appointed by Judge Workman to be on the rehabilitation of adjudicated juveniles. And this is one issue that I'm very important. It's very important. But one of the issues that I worked with before, 2 years ago, is I believe we have to consider workforce development. Workforce development is very important to me, because we have minors out of work, we have other people out of work, and I have probably 2,000 children in the state's custody that have not been dealt a good hand and are behind in their education, and they can't afford to go to college. They can't afford to, and so they're so behind. Some of them succeed, some of them don't. But basically, we started working on workforce development for the new natural gas things coming here, and I'm very pleased to say that there are a lot of jobs out there that you don't have to have a college education. So I've been working with the national gas industry and the vocational rehab centers and the junior colleges, so that we can lift everybody up. And so when our economy goes viral here with the new industry, I want everybody to have a chance, and especially the people that haven't had an opportunity that will not have an opportunity to go to college. Those are just some of my issues, and I appreciate your time, and I'd ask for endorsement.
My name is Sherry Wong. I am a first-time candidate for the 35th District seat of House of Delegates. I am a business owner and a job creator. I have expanded my business ×4 in the past year and a half. I employ almost 100 people. I am a health plan administrator. I am a widowed parent. My sons are product of public schools. They're doing quite well within that framework. I want to run on a business. I am a business accountable person. I am a business responsible person. I want to foster that responsibility and that accountability within a lawmaking stance. I would like to see more economically business-minded, encouraging opportunities within this state. And I'm like Bobby, if we can afford those folks that can't get to college and who can't get through these trade schools, I'm all about fostering opportunities for them as well, so we can all have a seat at the table. We can all enjoy living and being West Virginians. And thank you for your time. I appreciate the invite. Your endorsement is much appreciated.
Could you explain to anyone who may be watching that you need to excuse yourself for a few minutes?
Yes, I have a business appointment where it's very desirable for me to be there. It will really make it will give my staff a great opportunity to make a great living on one day. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm just not going to be like stomping out.
Then finally, I'm Thornton Cooper. I'm a native and resident of South Charleston, attended South Charleston High School, Yale University, where I got my BA in political science, and WV Law School, where I got my doctorate of jurisprudence. Retired state employee, 2 sons, 2 granddaughters. One of them is 14 days old. My older son, Jeremy, who once was on Andrew's soccer team, lives in Preston County. He's an attorney, and his wife is a nurse, and they had a daughter. He's both a farmer and a lawyer. My son, Timothy, is a composer. He went to WVU and then University of Tennessee, and he's worked with a doctor at the University of Hartford. And he went to GW. And it is kind of funny, I'm the only one who doesn't live in the GW Tennessee. So if you live in St. Albans or Nitro or Dunbar or Institute or Jefferson, I'm the person who lives closest to it. And I'll describe, it's very important that we have more jobs in West Virginia. My grandparents, my grandfathers were both small businessmen. I guess I've had a little business as an attorney. We have to bring businesses in. Since 1950, the year I was born, people have been leaving West Virginia. We need to change that. Our population is, we need to have more young people. We need to have more educated people. We need to have more services to the whole state. So anyway, I'm the last but not least.
Well, we'll start asking you some specific questions now. And maybe we'll start this way, especially since you do have.
You're so kind to accommodate me. I'm always that
There's
person.
been some news in this race, not necessarily having to do specifically with you all, but there was an incumbent who is now not going to be on the ballot, and there's been a dispute over whether a substitute could be on the ballot. The substitute would have been the candidate who was fifth in the Republican primary. What should be the standard for putting someone on the ballot as a substitute?
Well,
this point before the election.
Well, we need to comply with the state code. And my position is the State Election Commission did comply with the state code. I understand the electoral board took a different position, but my position is, as an attorney, I reviewed that. It was a unanimous decision of the bipartisan State Election Commission that Ms. Raines, which the vacancy created by her departure, the Republicans should not be able to appoint somebody to fill that vacancy. And I think that is the way that the law reads. I realize the state Supreme Court may or may not go along with it. The hearing is before them on the morning of the 30th of September, and I shall be in attendance, although I'm not trying to intervene. If some of the comments about making it easier to appoint somebody so that to be a Republican on the ballot trouble me in terms of where that would take us, because I do not want a situation where someone who doesn't have many assets wins a primary, and then the people in his or her party say, well, why don't you drop out of the primary, drop out, we're going to appoint somebody who can win an election. I just think there's a lot of mischief we have to try to avoid. So if you want to change the state code, remember that we have some problems, and I understand the Daily Mail editorial board wants to have 4 Republicans on the ballot. I fully get that. But I also don't want to create a situation where we have a lot of mischief created by making it easy for someone to persuade someone who was elected, who's not sick or anything like that, just to drop out and have somebody else who didn't have the guts to run in the primary. Now, that wasn't the case with Ms. Sprousman Davis. She did run. But I'm just saying there's some mischief. If you beware of the bottle that when the genie gets out, you can't put it back in.
Am I next?
Yes.
I'm just going to speak to that from a personal point of view. I know firsthand what grief can do to you. I've experienced it in the most vicious way possible. And Ms. Raines did what she had to do in order to survive. And I would just co-sign that statement anywhere you ask that of me. And I will leave the legal mechanisms and the results thereof to other people. But I fully understand why Ms. Raines had to step back, because I've had great loss in my life here just recently as well. My father passed away 2 weeks before her mother did, and barring the other losses I've experienced, I can fully understand grief and what it does to a person. So I fully support her in her personal decisions, and that's pretty much the only way I can speak to that particular issue at this point.
Well, I guess I could agree with both of them. I think that there are some things that could happen within the system. You know, that someone wanted to just exchange somebody for another candidate. I think that would cost both parties a lot of problems. I believe the decision that they made was the correct decision. It goes farther than the grief. It goes further than her turning in her records, turning in the things, turning in her reports. I will leave it up to the courts. I know her very well. I sympathize with her, and I can understand But I think that we have guidelines that we have to go by, and I think the court will lead us into that direction of whether that it was the proper thing to do or it was not the proper thing to do.
Different approach. I agree with Sherry on the fact that it was a tough time for Suzette. As an attorney, I obviously believe that the code should be read in plain language and followed to the fullest extent. However, it's not fair to the candidate who gets brought in to basically only have a month or less to campaign and raise money. The other thing is I'm not sure the exact date, but I believe some ballots might have already been printed, and that's not fair to the taxpayers either. So if we do some revisions to the code, there needs to be something set up where it doesn't inflate not only the taxpayers but the candidate, because regardless of the party, every candidate should have a fair shot, and that's my position on it.
Just to sort of piggyback on what Andrew said, I think that what we're seeing here is a result of years of additions to code, when very often, especially with the state code, addition turns into subtraction. What you end up with is laws that are very, very difficult to interpret, very difficult to apply, and when you're forced to look at them, it creates a situation where there's significant resources that need to be expended in order to try to determine what they mean. I think that what we would really be smart to do is to open up this whole section of code, try to figure out a way to simplify it so that in the future these things are pretty clear cut, and the Supreme Court wouldn't be needed, lawyers wouldn't be needed, and we can truly determine when somebody can go on, when they can't, when they come off, and I don't think that would be too terribly difficult. And just all that being said, I think that in this particular election cycle, there's a lot of humanity that's being lost in some of our politicking, and it's important for everyone to remember that everyone that's running is a human being, and everyone has a real life with family members at home, and we would all do very well at all levels of politics to probably treat each other with just a little bit more respect. Thank you.
I think the State Election Commission had a bit of a tough job because the code that was in place to handle the replacement of the candidate specified extenuating circumstances. And I know they threw that around quite a bit. Would this be extenuating circumstances? And a lot of that is very subjective. I mean, to Suzette, the loss of her mother and the loss of a long-term relationship was devastating to her. And it caused her great concern going forward with her candidacy and thinking about her service to this state going forward. But to someone else, it may not be that big of a deal, and there may be an opportunity for some shenanigans if it's too loose. So I think we need to do a better job specifying what those extenuating circumstances could be. Whether it's the death of a loved one, the loss of a long-term employment, whatever those circumstances may be, so that there's not quite so much room for interpretation by the State Election Commission. On the other side of things, I think it's unfair to the citizens of the 35th House District to only have 3 candidates when 4 should have been slated. There are those out there that would like to see all 4 seats filled by Republican candidates. They're not going to have that opportunity. They're going to go to the polls and they're going to check 3, and then there's going to be somebody else basically elected on the other side. They're not going to have an opportunity to have 4 Republican representatives. So I think it's unfortunate that part of the democratic process has been lost because of it.
Without a doubt, the extenuating circumstances for speak up. Okay. Well, without a doubt, it's very unfortunate what happened with Suzette, and the timing is unfortunate. I am in that camp that I think we have an antiquated system, electioneering code, that needs to absolutely be revisited. And then there's other things that have come out of this, and I'm not sure the officials is doing the appropriate job at times as far as looking at campaign finance reports. And of course, that was part of this issue too. But we must revisit the code.
Actually, a couple of these answers has led to the questions I wanted to ask, and it's not related to that situation, but we always hear from during election season, from candidates say, we want to do this, or we want to do law for this, and so on and so on. I want to know, what laws are antiquated? What laws do you want to get rid of? How can we make state government less bulky and more effective? And we would start with you.
Oh my gosh. You know, you just look at the volumes of our code right now, and you can look at any one. It's all open up for review. You know, if I have to, look at one, it could be our tax code. We have a very antiquated system as it relates to our property tax and being dedicated to our education system. There could be a review of that particular code. You know, we've all talked about ways to increase business opportunity here in the state. And the first thing we talk about is the business equipment and inventory tax. Well, easier said than done. We're going to have to open up the code in order to do something on that, because those dollars are dedicated to our public education system, and it's geared to a couple of counties. You know, on another one, I think we could look at the number of agencies that we have in place right now. The third thing would be, let's implement, and going off a little bit here, but let's implement a sunset provision of all our rules and regulations that we implement right now. If we put something in place now, according to code, we have to come back and create a new law to take it off. I think we ought to have a 5-year sunset provision with everything that's passed.
When you asked the question, first thing I thought of is that as a business owner, things that we struggle with, we always talk about trying to create a more business-friendly state, and the things that we could do, as Eric mentioned, to create that environment, to encourage entrepreneurs, to encourage West Virginia business owners to grow and expand their businesses. And I think time and time again, we keep looking back at our tax code. And unfortunately, it's not always easy to interpret. I mean, we have a CPA that meets with us on a monthly basis to come in and help us, interpret tax code to make sure that we're staying within the rules and regulations when it comes to business tax. And they take more than their fair share of flesh every time. And there's less and less going to the bottom line. Not only can you go back in and cancel out some of these tax provisions, but you also have to think about on the other side the budgetary concerns that those create, because when you eliminate a tax or reduce a tax, then there's obviously less money going into the state coffers. We have to take a careful look at our budget and go line by line and really make some determination where we can be saving money, where we can be spending money more wisely. Is it the reduction or elimination of certain agencies? Is there overlap within some of these agencies that really needs to be pared down and looked at so that we can put our dollars in more specific areas? We focus all the time on our contracts that we have with different companies. We use IT companies, we use telephone, we use computers, computer software, and we're always looking for new opportunities to save money there. And I think as a state, we don't do enough of that. We need to make sure that we're giving our taxpayers the very best bang for the buck.
It's a great question, Kelly, and I think it really comes down at the end of the day to priorities. And I think a state government, when it's doing what it should be doing, does two things really, really well, and that's education and infrastructure. And I think that we spend a lot of money on things that aren't those two things, and unfortunately, it cuts down on the amount of money and the amount of resources that we can expend on those two things. I think if what we're talking about is creating jobs, what business owners who are trying to move into a state and what business owners who are currently in a state want is they want great roads and they want great schools. And we don't have either of those two things right now. And so, from my perspective, going through the entire state budget and the entire state code, figuring out ways to redivert our resources into making sure those two things happen is of the absolute utmost importance. And people talk about priorities all the time, and I think what sometimes gets lost in that discussion is, well, you can prioritize education, you can prioritize roads, but what you really need to be prioritizing is students. And what you really need to be prioritizing is the people of West Virginia. And so what my focus would be is to ensure that when we are building more roads, that we're doing that in a way that helps the most people, and that students are always the center of the discussion when we're talking about how we get great schools.
Kelly, as I understand your question, it was kind of just an overlying theme of simplification to me. Dealing with the state code and state regulations every day, there's inconsistencies in the entire code which cause the waste of resources, going to the courts, figuring out what's wrong. I mean, if it was up to me, I would set up a committee to where, hey, we're passing this legislation this year. Let's make sure that the state code matches with the state regulations so that it's not over complicated or they're not parallel, because then once that happens, then we do waste the taxpayers' money because we have to go to the court systems and make sure that everything, what the legislative body interpreted it to be. So my point to yours was simplification, and I would set up a committee to where, hey, we're passing these bills this year, let's make sure that everything is parallel. And then once you get that established, you can work down from there and start simplifying the entire code, the state regulations, so that we can open this state for better business, better understanding of the laws, and everybody will be much happier.
There is a lot to do, but I really think in the years I've served in the House of Delegates that the Republicans and the Democrats have done a job and really tried to work and to bring big business back into the state. This is something that we've all been dedicated to, but we still need to look at this tax code. We need to look at many other things that aren't equal in the state. One thing, I serve on the government organization committee, where we are in charge of all the departments. Well, that is a mess, and we can combine some of those departments and have tried to and have done it. But it takes years because no one wants to give up their area there. So these are the things that have to be worked out over several years. I believe that we should break up the Department of Human Services. We were going to put a bill in to start the process. I think we should bring the children's issues out. I think we should bring the Medicaid out. It's gotten too big, too bulky, and nothing is getting accomplished. So there's a lot of work to do, but these things that we're going to do will take 2 to 3 years to accomplish. That doesn't mean that we should try. One thing that I'm really upset now is the inequities of where we're putting our money and what we're not putting into social issues. If you don't have a healthy workforce, then we're not doing anybody, businesses, any services. If you don't have behavioral health care plans, we have no funding for that. We have no funding for our drug rehab programs. So how we have to look at the budget and redirect some of that money. I'm not going to say the certain amount because I don't have billions of dollars in Medicaid. $3 million are put on services for children for behavioral health care services. Now there's money there, but like I said, in cutting all the money out may not be the answer. We just need to redirect that money.
I'm going to go along that thread in redirecting of money. I am a strong advocate of infrastructure. My farm-to-table restaurant depends on good roads, good trade agreements, good ways to get my product in my doors and to my customers. So seeing the improvements there would be a great boon to me as well as to other business owners like me. And as far as tax accountability, I really would have loved to have just 1/10% of that $25 million tax break that Mr. Justice got. I would have loved to have a tax break like that, especially being closed down for 5 days because my tap water was bad. I didn't see any relief from that at all. There's no insurance for that. So I had to eat that. And I had to do the best I can while not laying anybody off to continue my business plan and my business model, all the while begging the health department come in and get me back open so that I could serve my customers and give my staff. So the tax breaks that are given to certain, and some of that can come to us small folks. Whether that's simplified or not, I really don't know. But it would surely make our business climate a lot more attractive if small folks like me could see something like that coming their way versus the big guys. I'm trying not to sound like Mighty Mouse here, but that chemical spill was what did it in for me. So, I'm going to preach about that until the sun sets. So, thank you for that.
Yes, and I certainly, I know a little bit about why the problems of state government. I've worked in the executive branch for 29 years. You look at the Department of Highways, they said, well, we got all these roads out in the rural parts of the rural counties. That as a result of consolidation decisions that were made back in the 1930s in the New Deal. Likewise, Our county school systems were created in the New Deal. Before that, we had magisterial district school systems. We had like 10 magisterial districts in the 1930s. Each one had its own school system. Plus, we had before Brown v. Board. Very, very inefficient. So people say, well, we need to consolidate. We're one of the most consolidated in terms of school districts in the whole country. The problem is, this is West Virginia. We are a rural state. And people say, cut this tax and cut that. Well, I'm a fiscal conservative. We're going to cut some tax, we're going to cut this tax, but basically we're going to have to keep the same amount of revenue. But if we keep raising taxes, you're going to force people out of the state. So, you can pander to this group or pander to that group, but my feeling is protect the services we already have, and before we think about providing new services, figure out whether, where's the money going to come from. I think what I'm focused on is not trying to bring a whole bunch of new programs in, it's to preserve the ones we have, which is going to be very difficult. The coal revenues are dropping, the gambling revenues are dropping, and so we've got to be realistic about what is possible and not promise the people of West Virginia the moon. We have to live within our means, just as most taxpayers do every day of the year.
Ms. Hackler kind of mentioned this, but the governor has made it clear that he wants to address juvenile justice and juvenile justice reform in the next session. He started some work courses and work with Pew to address that. Traditionally, West Virginia has incarcerated more juveniles than almost any other state in the nation for decades. And most of those kids are coming from Kanawha County. What are some of the ways that you would address either getting less kids into these centers or just keeping them out of the centers in the first place?
Every generation, it's a new juvenile justice thing. They had a complete overhaul of the juvenile justice laws back around 1977 when I worked in a prosecutor's office. And so you always come up with these things. The fact of the matter is you got a lot of dysfunctional families, you have a lot of drug use, and so government can promise the moon, but you have to protect the public from people who commit violent crime. If the kids are not committing violent crime, they're doing something that's more like truancy or something like that, then you decide what type of sanction requires the least degree of incarceration or restraint on the kid. And realize kids are kids. We've all been kids. Kids, being an adolescent is a learning thing, and you make mistakes. And so, you want kids not to be scarred for the rest of their life if they do some really stupid things if it doesn't involve somebody being injured or killed. I mean, part of the problem is we've had a war on drugs for decades and decades and decades. So now the country's moving towards legalization of marijuana. I don't think that's a panacea. I'm just saying we're beginning to realize that putting the people away is not the solution. But the politicians did what the constituents wanted. The politicians, the constituents said, put people away, keep them off the streets. So the politicians have done what the people wanted. Now we end up with so many people incarcerated, whether they're adults or whether they're people under the age of 18. So I think we're learning from how expensive it is. A, it's expensive to the taxpayers to keep them there, and B, it's a waste of the 70 years or so average life expectancy to have kids in juvenile detentions that can go on to prison. So it's much better to have them in school if we can do it.
Early intervention is, I think, a key for this. We need more mental health services in this state. There's a severe lack of that. JB and I had a fantastic opportunity here yesterday to take a tour of St. Albans Police Department and go through those wards and listen to those officers' struggles that are quite intense, dealing with some of these kids that are repeat offenders, and they're felonious repeat offenders. And the lack of services within families and within their early childhoods, I think, is just a big key in this. They don't have any basis to build their moral compass. They don't have any basis within their family unit to learn what's right and what's wrong and why education is important and why you need to go to school. So I think the early intervention programs that we need to, like Thornton says, we need to grasp a hold of them and preserve them and expand them to a certain degree for some of these rural children who are being victimized and subjugated by people who come from out of town. Hey, you want that new pair of shoes? Here's how you get it. So early intervention and mental health availability to services, I think, is a key to that.
Being appointed to the Juvenile Services Commission is an eye-opener to me. We have children that have been adjudicated that we're going to lose because they have been so traumatized by the state and by their families that there's not a lot of hope. But we've got to try to give them something. But there are a lot of children that I have looked at and we have observed and gone into it that have a chance. Have a chance. So on that end of the gamut, you know, we can discharge them from jail and everything, but if they don't have any community services out there, they're going to come back in. So that's what we're looking at, and it's just a drop in the bucket, but that's what we have to do. Elder Rosenberg said that you change things, and she was my mentor, just a little drop at a time. And so we're trying to do in the adjudicated juveniles in the facilities. We only have one facilities that have any type of system to send them to vocational problems, systems like that, or any kind of work ethics, or train them, you know, in the schools that we have. So that is at the end of the game that we are dealing with. But I have a judge, Judge Johnson, that I really respect, and he's a children's judge, and he said either you take care of them in a playpen, or you take care of, or you pay for them in a big pen. And we do not take care. We do not take care of the children in the playpen. We do not take care of the families and the services to help them so they don't become adjudicated juveniles. So that has been our work, and not my work. The work with the children's issues, the children's society, everybody. I'm only a vehicle in the legislature that helps shepherd these bills through. And we have, in the last 6 years, made an attempt. We are not like that. We are not anywhere near it. But if we can save one child from being put into a mental hospital here in the state because they just can't function outside and their parents don't know what to do with them. And I will agree, some of them is because of the parents. So we need to have places for them to go and try to save what we can that is already in the system. But we need to put money, which we do not do, in the prevention of behavioral health care services for them, counseling for their parents, and we are not doing enough. And that's why I think that we need to redirect the money down where we can put better citizens out that can be good employees and good for West Virginia.
Dave, I've been fortunate enough throughout my career to work with law enforcement agencies all across the state. And I believe the best way to deal with the issue that you brought up is to deal with those law enforcement agents, work with them to figure out how do we keep these juveniles off the street. Well, I've dealt with them, like I said, throughout my whole career, and the one thing that I've heard from all of them is rehabilitation. Many of these juveniles, they come in, they go to juvenile centers, and then they leave. We need to create basically a rehabilitation system where, one, they're actually getting the help they needed, but also linking that to education. There needs to be a system in place where, hey, let's get you back on the right track, but let's also get you back into the school system. Let's also get you back to where you can get your GED and move forward. And that's something that we're lacking. And that's the thing that I hear most from law enforcement agencies across the state is the rehabilitation. And that's what we need to work on better.
Let me start by saying that I think far too often we begin the discussion to answer these difficult questions with government being the answer. And I think that while the government can provide a lot of assistance, the answer to this particular problem can only come from home. And I think that the problems that we're discussing are a symptom of an economy that just isn't getting the job done. And there's a significant lack of hope within a large portion of our population that is permeating into their children. And it's something that's very, very difficult to overcome, not impossible. But until we can instill a sense of a better tomorrow, the people who are raising the children in this valley, we're going to have a very difficult time using government resources to try to stem this tide. All that being said, I think that a flexible education system, one that is tailored to the needs of our specific communities is vastly important. I think very often we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, talking about how Texas does this or Virginia does that. Well, the point of the matter is we're in West Virginia, and I think we need to create a system that is tailored for our specific problems. And just to sort of finish, I talked about priorities earlier. There really is no greater priority for the government than to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And children are at the very top of that list. And the way that our government is being run right now, we're having a hard time providing for those people. And until we can either increase our revenue or shift around our priorities to really make sure that we're addressing these problems, I'm not sure that we're getting the job done. And I hope to get up in the legislature again to make sure that we can do that.
I think JB hit on something there that a lot of the problems that we're having with juvenile delinquency stems from kids being in broken homes. And that doesn't necessarily mean mom and dad split up. It means that the homes are broken because of the poor economy. Mom and dad are out of work. They're struggling to keep food on the table. One of the number one reasons that marriages break up in America is over money. And when you're in really tough financial times, it's easy to go at each other and to blame each other for your circumstances. And kids soak all this up like little sponges. Having two little boys at my house all the time, I'm on walking on eggshells around them because I know that they just take all these things, and sometimes you're not even obvious about it. Sometimes they're very underlying issues, and you're upset about something, you're down about something. They pick up on that. Kids are very sensitive to that sort of thing. So it's so tough right now for all these folks around the valley and across this state who are in circumstances beyond their control. They don't have gainful employment. They've gotten involved in drugs. Drugs is one of the most pervasive things in our society right now, and it's tearing homes apart. And all these kids are products of those broken homes. One of the things we can do is to talk to our early childhood educators. My mother-in-law was an elementary school principal for years up in Preston County, and she used to tell me all the time about how uninvolved parents would be and how she knew very early on, watching a child from the early years on through life, if a child was going to be in trouble, if they were going to turn out to be somebody that was going to be incarcerated later on. I mean, she can see the signs. She can see the signs. I think we need to give our educators the abilities to identify at-risk children, kids that may be in a broken home or may be taken advantage of or abused in some way. Identify those kids and try to get them better involved and try to get them on a better track. We have a lot of programs out there that may be run by volunteer organizations or faith-based organizations. We don't have to do it all ourselves as the West Virginia government. We can partner with some of these outside organizations, these volunteer groups, and get these kids involved in after-school programs, because so much of the trouble happens from the time that they leave the classroom to the time they get home in the evening, when their parents get home, or the time they show up at the school the next day. And if you can get them involved in things, whether it's sports, whether it's a Girls and Boys Club, or it's Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, get them involved in programs that are after school that give them hope, that give them purpose, that give them an education outside of the walls of the school, and prepare them with better life skills, and let them know that they are somebody, something that builds self-esteem and makes these kids better in these very early developmental years. I think we'll see an improvement long term if we're able to identify those kids and get them involved in those types of programs.
Just quickly, it is a home environment. And home environment starts with a positive environment in general, and we don't have that right now with our job environment. And I think with a positive employment picture resonates throughout the community and into the homes and ultimately on down. There is a lot of need at the education level and to look at this early and have the involvement. But I may also ask, we all talk about many programs. I'm not so sure that we don't have too many programs out there that spread our resources too thin so that we don't really zoom in on the issue at hand at any one time.
You talk about spreading resources to families. In the finance committee, there have been serious budget issues just with the state in general, reaching the rainy day fund for the first time last year, which thought could happen again this year. We talked about this a little bit. What are some of the changes to the way the state does the budget or just the way that the state gets its revenue that you think need to happen in order to have just a better fiscal future?
The top of the peak here, and there's so many different ways there, but you're exactly right. This past year, here we dipped into the rainy day fund to $100 million. We dipped into many cash accounts to help fund this as well. It's a two-sided equation. One, you have the revenue side, and currently we are constrained by declining severance tax, at least on our primary resource of coal, not quite being fully offset by increases in our natural gas severance tax, declining gambling revenue that's about 18% of the budget. But at the end of the day, we need to broaden our tax base. And it comes back to creating that environment that's going to bring new business into the state. And we as elected officials don't create jobs, but we do create the policies. And it comes back to the right tax, the right legal, and the right regulatory structure. So to pick out any one particular line item, very difficult, because many line items can be looked at. On the flip side, the expense side of the equation, we have an education system that takes up 1/4, over $1 billion of our general revenue. Let's look at some of the things that were recommended in the audit that was done just a couple of years ago. Consolidated purchasing throughout all the school systems. We're too top-heavy in bureaucracy. We have the DHHR, $4 billion there. I think that there are many areas that can truly be looked at there on an expense reduction to help. Obviously, the one reason quit, our budget was caused by increasing our Medicaid rolls by the tune of 90,000, maybe 120,000, which was about $200 million. That was covered this past year, so that should level itself out. But hope that answers some.
Yeah, I think it's both a production problem, meaning that the taxes aren't coming in like they used to, and then it's a spending problem, meaning that we're not spending money like we're supposed to. As a business owner, we constantly look at the bottom line, and in between the top and the bottom line, there's a lot of things that need to be paid, a lot of bills, a lot of money going out, and there's a lot of money coming in to try to offset those, and hopefully at the end of the day, we're left with a little something left over to take home to our families. It's one of the reasons that I started running for the House of Delegates, because I wanted to make sure that more people with business experience, people that know what it's like to have to meet a payroll, people that know what it's like to have to run a budget. If you don't run a budget in business, you go belly up. It's a make or break. There's no opportunity to steal money from here, steal money from there, to try to make your ends meet. That doesn't work very long. And you go out of business. So if you want to be successful in business, you have to mind your expenses and make sure that you're putting your money in the right place. We have opportunities all the time in my practice to invest in new technology. That new technology has to make sense not only from a patient care standpoint, point of view, but it also has to make sense from a monetary point of view. If a new piece of equipment costs $100,000, but the reimbursement only pays $5 every time you use it on a patient, it's going to take a long time to pay that off. We have to do the same thing with the state budget. We have to look at where we spend the money and make sure that we're spending it appropriately. There was a project last year to replace a bunch of highway signs. And there wasn't a whole lot wrong with the highway signs that were already there. Some of them were a little faded, but not to the point where they were dangerous, not to the point where they were steering people in the wrong direction. But we went to a lot of expense to replace signs that weren't worn out yet, only because somebody said, well, these have outlived their life expectancy, we need to replace those signs. We need to look at the big picture and think about our infrastructure when we're making purchases like that, and see if it really makes sense to spend that money in that particular instance, or if it makes sense to spend that on a more pressing project, something that's going better towards public safety. I think if we took an overall big picture look at our state finances, we're going to find a lot of instances like that where we could have made a better decision with our spending. And if we are diligent in our efforts to improve the business-friendly environment here in West Virginia, we're going to start to offset some of those losses that we've had in severance tax and everything else, and start to improve our tax base so that we can start improving the money that's coming in rather than raising taxes on the citizens that remain in the state.
For the first part of your question, Dave, I think the process is actually pretty good. I'm on the Judiciary Committee, so I didn't get to see it firsthand, but the way that we sort of segregate the budgetary process from the rest of the legislative session, I think, is actually a good way to ensure that it gets the appropriate amount of attention and that the ebbs and flows of the legislature don't necessarily have the same effect on the overall budget process. So that being said, I think that it truly is a revenue problem, and I think we talk a lot about the business climate in the state of West Virginia, and the business climate isn't very good. The answer as to why is a much more difficult question, one to which we don't have time to answer here today. But I think one thing that we don't really talk about a whole lot is just our perception throughout the country. And in many ways, perception is reality, and we aren't perceived as being a place that's very friendly to have businesses. Now, why is that? I think it's because we don't answer the question, how does a government get money? Because businesses give it to them by providing jobs and tax revenue. Businesses are the answer to the revenue problem, and until we start treating them as the engine that drives every single thing that we do, I don't know that they're going to want to come here. They're going to say, you know what, you might have the gas, so we'll send some guys in there to drill it, but we're not going to send you the lawyers and the accountants and the executives who are in charge of a whole company. So our economy, it doesn't have the requisite layers to truly grow and be the kind of state that I think we can be. And so all of that being said, I think we could do a lot to help our business climate just by approaching the ways that we get money and talking about them in a different way.
Dave, it comes down to two words to me: effective and efficient. Yes, I believe that the state can be more efficient in its resources. We do have the Finance Committee. They do look at the things that need to be cut or expended, but we do need to be more detailed about that. However, on the effective side, we need effective, legislation that will bring businesses to West Virginia. I think I've talked about this with this committee before. I mean, a bill like Project Launchpad, that was vetoed by the governor. That brought businesses to the state of West Virginia. When you bring businesses in, you bring jobs, and when you bring jobs, you bring revenue. So I think we just need more innovative and creative legislation that will boost revenues, as everybody at this table has said.
Can you repeat the question? Because we've discussed a lot of things here.
Sure.
What was your question?
Sure. I was talking about the fact that, we've heard, at least I've heard, I'm sure that you guys have heard from some of the people in the state budget office that, it's been a couple of really tough, difficult budget years, and last year the state used $100 million from the rainy day fund. This year is supposed to be worse, and then potentially getting better the year after that. So what are some of the ways that you can either address, if there's a spending problem or if there's a revenue problem, in order to just help, make the finances a little bit less, I don't know.
Well, say I have the answers to all that, but I think it's been discussed here that we have a pretty good review of the budget, and they work on it year-round, and so we have kind of a little control of that. I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't want jobs brought to West Virginia. I think that we have worked on that. I think it's looking at the budget, looking at the money that we have, and moving the money around to certain things that aren't needed anymore, and to review what services we have. We need to add a lot of services, but there are a lot of services out there that aren't effective anymore, and we need to look at that. Again, it's redirecting the money we have, and it is going to be hard for the Finance Committee with the decrease in funds come, and we're going to have to tighten our belt on that. But I do think we still can keep services. And when I was on the Finance Committee, I agree with them. I went through every line and every budget and every department, and we could cut costs. We really could cut. There's duplication of services in every one of those. And those are things that the Finance Committee can look at. And I guess I just have hope for West Virginia right now, and a lot of work to do.
Here's how I'd answer your question. First thing, you figure out, you want to protect the vulnerable, the very old, the very young, the people who are infirm. You don't want to cut programs of them.
Right.
Then, if you don't have enough revenue coming in to pay for the services you want, you're, as I said, I've been in government, I worked executive branch for 29 years, and over again. Sometimes you just got to say you're going to have to cut back 5% or 10% until the revenue comes up, and that's going to make people unhappy. And people will say you ought to cut somebody else's agency and not my agency. But if I were Earl Ray Tomlin, I mean, a lot of this comes down to him. He's the governor because he's going to make the proposal to the legislature. I would say if it looks like the revenue stream's not going to come in, say 5% cut back or something like that, or budget. That means that, and of course the problems when you do that, because you may want to have some very talented people you can't hire. But the legislature owes it to the people of West Virginia to operate under a balanced budget. It's not like the federal government where we got tens of thousands of dollars per capita that we're in debt. Our state constitution doesn't let us do that. And so eventually you got to decide what the most, to protect the infirm. And if you got to make some cutbacks, you make some cutbacks. And that's not popular, but that's what you got to do.
I thought that was interesting because, I heard people say cuts and I heard people look at reprioritizing spending, but nobody said tax increase. And I know that was something, that among other people, Senate President Jeff Kassler mentioned the potential of adding an increase in tobacco tax. He said that that'd be a way to immediately bring in up to $200 million for the state. Didn't make it through the House of Delegates last year, but it was certainly discussed. He was talking about, maybe that's not going to happen in the election year, but maybe in just a one-word yes or no answer. Do you think that a tax increase is the best way or a viable way to address budget issues in this session?
No.
I'm for the tobacco tax. I think that's a yes answer.
I'm for tobacco tax increase and have fought for that for decades.
Me too.
No.
I've heard Eric say something, so I thought we were going this way.
This one didn't have a.
No, the people of West Virginia are taxed now.
I'm a no.
I'll end this because our time's about up, and just another short answer question. And let's start with you, Ford. If there are 100 members of the House of Delegates, how many districts should there be?
100.
Oh, gosh.
You told Thornton to do a short answer, and he actually did.
No, he was just saying the amount of words he used in the
I don't know that answer. I'm just going with that. I don't think it should be 100 districts, but again, we went through the redistricting. We went through that horrible time, and I was on that committee, and we're stuck with that for 10 years, and I'd just like to wait 10 years to discuss it again.
Kelly, I'm fine with the process now, as it stands.
Single member districts is the only way to ensure the most democracy is for the most people.
Yeah, I think ultimately a single member district is going to be the best thing for the citizens of West Virginia.
I sponsored a bill for 100 member districts. One person, one vote. Absolutely. One other thing, I believe the code would allow us not to wait 10 years as it relates to the state delegation. For the federal standpoint, yes, we congressionally has to wait 10 years, but I think we would have the opportunity inside that 10-year period.
Thank you, everyone. Great to have you again, and good luck. How many years are we out from the election?
41.
You're asking number questions, man. That goes right back.
Well, we appreciate your time and